Do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them. This is the Wisdom Worth Knowing live stream podcast. I'm your host, Craig Chamberlain. Thank you for joining me this morning. This show is brought to you by Audible, where listening is the new reading. Get unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks completely free for 30 days. Sign up right now at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you. Welcome. The Wisdom Worth Knowing live stream podcast broadcasts live pretty much every morning around 6 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. You can join in on the discussion, which takes place later in the episode. We open up with the main topic, then we move into a discussion time, and you can post your comments during the entire live stream right on Facebook or YouTube. That's where it's monitored. And if you have not subscribed yet, consider subscribing. You can subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And we really should be at just about every podcast place at this point. If we're not, message me, please, and I will get us added there. Do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them. A lot easier said than done, right? Negative people. So, a few things here about this quote right off the bat. The very first three words, do not allow. The implication here, of course, is that we have control over who we let in and who we don't into our emotional state. A lot of us let the world happen to us. And when the world happens to us, and we feel like we are at the mercy of anything and everything around us, we have a tendency to blame others for our current emotional situation. So the very first part of that, where it says do not allow, I think that's probably the very first and most significant part of the sentence is if we don't take at least some consideration in knowing that we are responsible for our circle, our immediate circle. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, like you should have a circle that wants to see you win. Like that includes your circle of friends and relationships, or even just the people you generally surround yourself with. But if we don't take some responsibility for our circle, then our circle will just happen to us. And that's not good. I mean, a lot of this has to be balanced. And my reservation here is to go too extreme in some of this stuff, especially with the surrounding yourself with people who want you to win and then surrounding yourself only with positive people. It is good to do these things. It is good to, like I said, you have control over your circle. But it's also good to acknowledge that people are human and they're not always going to be perfect. So the people you surround yourself with, you don't want to be a full-on jerk about it, right? But I like to say this is more of a general practice than it is a hard-lined rule, is the do not allow negative people. I mean, we only have so much control over the people who we encounter. And then if we're valuing our friendships and relationships, there are going to be times or seasons in those friendships and relationships in which those you value are negative people. So just cutting everybody off who's negative isn't necessarily the healthiest approach, but you can momentarily or temporarily separate yourself or distance yourself from those relationships if they're affecting you in a negative way. So the do not allow, we do have control over the people who are in our lives. And then the other thing is we do have control over how we react. So that second part is do not allow negative people. How do you define a negative person? How do we define a negative person? Let me think about that for a second so I can properly communicate it here. How do we define negative people? We could call them a Karen, or as my kids say, the male equivalent for Karen is a Kyle. Negative people, though. I guess in my head, negative people are the ones who have a tendency on a regular basis to kind of drain me emotionally dry, to make me lose faith in humanity. I guess that would probably be my definition. It's not people who have a tendency or occasionally have negative thoughts or a drain. I don't think that's a negative person. I think that's just a person. Like, we all have negative tendencies. I mean, I think that's the default condition for most of us, is we tend to be cynical and negative. There are people who are incredibly positive by default. God bless them. I wish I could be that way all the time, but I'm certainly not. But I think negativity is our default condition. Cynical is our default condition. It's very easy to be a cynic. It is. It's just the natural state, I think. Being a positive person is not our natural state. So I don't necessarily consider some negativity to be toxic, but there is a level of negativity that is toxic, and I think we all have certain thresholds for that. And it's good for us to be able to identify what negative people are to us. And then some people's personality types just has a more significant drain on us than others. So it's good for us to know which people are, not specifically, but which personality traits in people have a particularly significant drain on us emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's just good for us to be aware of what has more of a drain on us than others. I don't think it's the same for everybody. I think that we all have certain weaknesses, or there are certain things that can drain us more than others from other people. I guess a perfect example of this is, I'll talk about diets, because it took me, I went through the whole diet thing last year, and it was not easy trying to be disciplined. And when you're trying to succeed in a specific area, then there's specific people, if you surround yourselves with them, who won't encourage you in that, or their mindset on that topic tends to be more of a drain than usual, because it's like, come on, man, I'm already trying hard enough to get through this. I don't need you to normalize my bad behavior, by forcing me to, oh, don't bother, you're fine, you don't need to lose weight, that kind of stuff. I don't even know if that's a negative person. It's just something that's not conducive to your growth. But the whole point of that example is that depending on what we're going through, depending on what other people are going through, depending on our weaknesses at that time, that definition of negative people may shift. But I do think that cynicism and negativity is the default condition. And it is hard to find people who are generally positive. It's not impossible, but it is hard. But we do need to love people no matter what, right? So finding this balance of dealing with negative people and surrounding yourself with people who want what's best for you, I think we do, to a degree, need that core group of support, that core support group that allows us to deal with the negativity of everyday people. And like I said before on the podcast, I work in customer service, so this negative people thing is a relatively common thing. So then that brings us to the final part of the quote, where it says, "Do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them." So the do not allow is we have control over our emotions. And then there's this turn you into one of them, which is like a transformational process. Is it just me, or is there just a reality to the slow shift of bad habits? Like, there's this transformation element to the quote where it says you'll turn into one of the negative people, as if this isn't a sudden overnight process. For me, it picks at you. It's like a little bit of chiseling over time. They may not break your soul immediately, but it's just like a little chip every day. Slowly, the negativity chips away at you and chips away at you and chips away at you. And 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, you wake up and you found out you've become the thing that you hate. You've become the negative person. It didn't happen overnight. There's like this transformative element to it. It's that quote that we talk about on the show regularly is, you become the net average of the people you spend the most time with. So give some strong consideration to your circle. You are going to encounter negative people. That's not the point of the quote. The point of the quote is, are we setting ourselves up for becoming like those people because we spend so much time with them? Because over time, I honestly believe we absorb people's emotion. And so if we spend too much time with the wrong group, we will slowly become that group. It just chips away at us. It's just this like conscious awareness that people have more of an influence on us than we think. I don't know if you guys have ever looked into something called an empath. I'm going to look up the definition of it and then I'll give you, let's see here, empath. See how they define it. Here we go. If you're the kind of person, and this is the kind of person I am, who absorbs people's emotion, even if you don't know them, just being in the room with certain people of certain personality types, you just kind of absorb those emotions. You may be an empath. Take a look at the definition of an empath. So empaths are highly sensitive individuals who have a keen ability to sense what people around them are thinking and feeling. Psychologists may use the term empath to describe a person that experiences a great deal of empathy, often to the point of taking on the pain of others at their own expense. Do you have a tendency towards being an empath? Do you absorb people's emotions more than the average person? I think it's fair to say that we have different levels of this, all of us. Some people are just the opposite. They don't absorb people's emotions at all. They are not empathetic. And we all absorb it to a point, I think, but there is a reality that some of us have this condition more than others. And I think the empaths, and if you are an empath, I think so we have a higher sensitivity to things like social media, because it's almost like overwhelming when you start to like actually emotionally absorb everything everyone's going through all the time. It's like we can't even emotionally take it. It's such an overpowering and overwhelming sense of absorption. So if you do have like this tendency to absorb people's emotions, this negative people quote is going to be more significant for you. Some people really are good at setting boundaries emotionally, and they notice a negative person immediately and they protect themselves emotionally. They're like, I'm not going to let myself absorb this. But a lot of the times with empaths, it just happens unconsciously. I can actually be in a room and I can absorb other people's emotions in their conversations that they're having with other people. And it's really frustrating. I mean, it's a gift, but it's also kind of a curse. And then sometimes I've just got to separate myself from situations and people so that I can be alone. I think empaths have a tendency to want to be alone more. If you're a highly sensitive person, when it comes to absorbing people's emotions, being alone is actually like therapeutic in a lot of ways. It's like an opportunity to not be in a situation where you are absorbing everybody and everything that's going on around you. But like I said, it is a gift. We just need to learn to manage it. And I think that's why that quote is incredibly valuable. Do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them. We can't change people, so we need to be consciously aware of that. People can only change themselves. And if you're a religious person, you also acknowledge that God can change people, but we can't. We can encourage their growth, but we can't actually ultimately change them. So if somebody is a generally negative person, we need to be conscious of that. We can't transform them into a positive person. That's something they would need to do on their own. So we do need to be careful. And then there's generally the toxic people who we encounter who are emotionally broken or going through something really difficult at that time. And then these are the Karens, right? The ones you see on the internet that are throwing a fit and screaming at people. And you're like, how did it get to this point? It's like, well, that's not something that happened overnight. In many cases, that's the emotional tool that's worked for them throughout their entire lives. And then now we're witnessing it publicly. And a lot of times that's the only emotional tool they've ever had. And it's not good to make excuses for that, because obviously there's no excuse for that kind of behavior. If you are this person who throws people under the bus, know that your decisions don't just affect you or the person you're yelling at. It has a broad scale impact. It's like a ripple effect. Because the person you're doing that to is going to have to go through the rest of the day. Because we're human beings. We're social creatures. We see how people behave and react, and it does impact us. So we should be conscious of that. That the way we react does impact other people, and it impacts how they react to other people. But we do have that power to make things better or worse. Wisdom Worth Knowing is brought to you by Amazon Audible. If you're like me and you love reading but don't have the time, then Audible audiobooks may be the perfect solution for you. With Audible, listening is the new reading. You can pop in your earbuds and discover that next exciting adventure, or expand your knowledge from any PC, Mac, Android, Alexa, or Apple device. And check this out. Because you listen to this show, for a limited time, you can get instant access to thousands of audiobooks from Audible's Premium Plus catalog completely free. Just visit audible.wisdomworthknowing.org right now and take advantage of a free 30-day trial. That's right, for 30 days, you'll get full access to Audible's Premium Plus catalog, as well as an additional free title of your choosing. If you discover audiobooks aren't for you, no problem. You can cancel instantly online. That's it. It's that simple. 2 years ago, audiobooks began to change my life, and they may change yours too. Pause this podcast and head over to audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. That's audible.wisdomworthknowing.org and sign up right now. If you want to join in the live chat, you can go ahead and hop in there at any time, and it will be discussed during the discussion time. If we don't have any chat, that's not a big deal, of course. We will just close for the day. But what are your thoughts on do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them? I'm trying to think of specific examples. Life is challenging, and I do know that since negativity is the default state, it has taken a tremendous amount of work for me to be generally positive about most things. I am generally cynical. It is very difficult for me to be a positive person. One of my closest friendships is we're generally both cynics, and so we have conversations pretty regularly that are extremely negative, but we cope with that through sarcasm. And so kind of swinging that pendulum is difficult, but It is nice to have conversations with other people who have negative tendencies, as long as the final outcome is, therapeutic. So, like if we're just having a conversation to get all the negativity out, to kind of drain it out of our system so that we don't carry it around with us everywhere, that's beneficial, I think. It allows us to kind of at least cope with that. So thank you for joining me today on the Wisdom Worth Knowing live stream podcast. I'm your host, Craig Chamberlain. If you liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe on your favorite social network. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help the show grow. You can visit wisdomworthknowing.org if you want to connect with the show or listen to all of the other episodes. This show is brought to you by Audible, where listening is the new reading. Get unlimited access to thousands of audiobooks completely free for 30 days. Sign up right now at audible.wisdomworthknowing.org. And until next time, remember, do not allow negative people to turn you into one of them. And let's work on today being the best version of ourselves we can, because that's all we can do. Thank you for joining me. I will see you all tomorrow.